For 12 years, one man never missed a single football game. Rain or snow, he was always there. But on the biggest night of my life, his seat was empty. I thought he had forgotten me. I was completely wrong. Every Friday night, our small town came alive. The bright stadium lights could be seen from miles away, and the sound of cheering filled the air. For most people, it was just another football game. For me, it was something much bigger. Before every kickoff, I always looked toward the same seat in the stands. And every single time, I found my father. He always wore the same old blue jacket. A paper cup of hot coffee rested in his hands, and the biggest smile appeared on his face the moment he saw me. He never shouted the loudest. He never tried to get attention. But somehow, I could always hear his voice above everyone else. When I was only 7 years old, I was terrified before my first football game. I thought I wasn't strong enough. I thought I would let everyone down. My father walked over, knelt beside me, and smiled. He said, "Son, don't play to impress people. Play because you love the game. Win or lose, I'll always be proud of you." Then he made me a promise. "I'll never miss one of your games." It sounded impossible. Life gets busy. People get tired. Promises are often forgotten, but not by my father. Year after year, he kept his word. I saw him in the pouring rain. I saw him sitting under heavy snow. I saw him wrapped in a blanket on freezing nights. Sometimes he came straight from work, with dirt still on his boots. He looked exhausted, but the moment our eyes met, he smiled like nothing else in the world mattered. People in town started recognizing him. "That's the father who never misses a game." Every time I heard those words, I smiled, because they were true. As I got older, I finally understood something. My father wasn't coming because he loved football. He was coming because he loved me, no matter how badly I played, no matter how many mistakes I made. After every game, he hugged me and whispered the same words. "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words became my greatest strength. Then my senior year arrived. College scouts filled the stadium every Friday night. Everyone said this season could decide my future. I felt the pressure, but I wasn't afraid, because I knew that before the game started, I'd look into the stands and see my father smiling back at me. I never imagined that one Friday night would be different. The biggest game of my life was coming, and for the first time in 12 years, that seat would be empty. The championship game finally arrived. The stadium had never been so full. Fans filled every seat. The marching band played loudly, and college scouts watched from the front rows with notebooks in their hands. Everyone said this was the biggest game of my life. As I walked onto the field, I did what I had done before every game for the last 12 years. I looked toward the 3rd row. My father's seat was empty. I blinked and looked again. Maybe he was late. Maybe he was getting coffee. Maybe he was stuck in traffic. I kept telling myself he would show up before the game started. The whistle blew. The game began. But every few minutes, my eyes drifted back to that empty seat. It didn't feel real. My father had never missed a game. Not one. I tried to focus on the plays, but my mind wasn't on football anymore. I missed an easy pass. I made mistakes I had never made before. My coach kept shouting my name, trying to bring my attention back to the game. My teammates looked at me with confusion. They knew something was wrong. At halftime, I sat quietly on the bench with my helmet in my hands. I couldn't stop thinking about my father. He always kept his promises. So where was he? The second half began. I gave everything I had, not because the scouts were watching, but because I hoped my father would walk through the gate at any moment. Every time the crowd stood up and cheered, I turned toward the entrance. Every time someone walked into the stadium, my heart skipped a beat, but it was never him. When the final whistle blew, I barely remembered the score. Winning or losing didn't matter anymore. As I walked off the field, my coach stopped me. He was holding his phone. His face looked pale. He placed a hand on my shoulder and quietly said, "Your mom is on the line." The moment I heard my mother's voice, I knew my life was about to change forever. My hands started shaking as I answered the phone. "Mom, what happened?" For a few seconds, I heard nothing but her crying. Then she finally spoke. "Your father collapsed this afternoon. He had a heart attack. He's in the hospital." The world around me suddenly went silent. I couldn't hear the crowd anymore. I couldn't hear my teammates celebrating. I dropped my helmet onto the grass and started running. I didn't even change out of my football uniform. The drive to the hospital felt like the longest journey of my life. I kept thinking about one thing. He promised he would never miss a game. If he wasn't there, something had to be terribly wrong. When I arrived at the hospital, my mother was sitting alone outside the room. Her eyes were red from crying. Without saying a word, she hugged me tightly. Then she whispered, "He's been asking for you." I slowly opened the hospital room door. The strong man I had always known looked different. Machines surrounded his bed. His face looked pale, but when he saw me, he smiled. It was the same smile I had seen in the stands every Friday night. I walked to his bedside and held his hand. He looked at my football uniform and quietly asked, "Did you play well?" I couldn't answer. Tears rolled down my face. The only thing I wanted was for him to come home. He squeezed my hand gently. "I'm sorry, son." His voice was weak. "I finally missed one of your games." I shook my head and tried to smile. "No, Dad." "You didn't miss it. You've been beside me in every game I've ever played. Every time I stepped onto the field, I carried your belief with me." His eyes filled with tears. He looked at me with the same pride he always had. "I always knew you were stronger than you believed." For a few moments, neither of us said anything. We simply held each other's hands. It felt like time had stopped. Then he looked at me one last time and whispered, "No matter where I am, I'll always be cheering for you." Those words became the most precious gift he ever gave me. I didn't know it then, but they would be the last words I would ever hear from my father. The next morning, my father was gone. The hospital room felt colder than ever before. His hand, the one that had always held mine, was no longer warm. I stood there in silence, unable to believe that the man who had never left my side was gone forever. A few days later, we held his funeral. Friends, neighbors, teachers, and former players came to say goodbye. One by one, they shared stories about my father, not because he was famous, not because he was rich, but because he had a heart that never stopped showing up for the people he loved. An older man walked up to me after the service. He smiled through his tears and said, "Your father talked about you every single day. He believed you would do something special." Those words stayed with me. Months passed. Life slowly moved forward. I graduated from high school and accepted a college football scholarship. The first game of the new season finally arrived. As I stepped onto the field, without thinking, I looked toward the stands. For just a second, I almost expected to see an old blue jacket and a paper cup of coffee, but the seat was empty. I smiled anyway, because I realized something. My father had never really left. He was in every lesson he taught me, every sacrifice he made, every word of encouragement he whispered after every game. Years later, I achieved my dream. I became a professional football player. Thousands of fans filled the stadium. Television cameras followed every move I made. People called me successful. But before every single game, I still looked toward the stands, not because I expected to see him, but because it reminded me why I played. After winning my first championship, a reporter asked me, "Who inspired you to become the player you are today?" I smiled, looked toward the sky, and answered, "My father. He never missed a single game." The reporter looked confused. He didn't know the story, but I did, because even on the one night his seat was empty, his love was still with me. Some heroes wear jerseys. Some heroes wear suits. But the greatest hero in my life wore an old blue jacket, held a simple cup of coffee, and loved his son more than words could ever say. Thanks for watching. New story video.